A disciplined soldier named Emma Carter was publicly humiliated, forced to strip down at inspection, and mocked for her shabby uniform by her cruel squad members, her silent dignity breaking under their jeers until General Marcus Westfield spotted the battle scar on her shoulder, and suddenly the entire barracks fell silent as 20 years of military secrets unraveled before their eyes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Devereux, a sprawling military base nestled in the hills of Northern Virginia. For most soldiers, inspection day was routine, a weekly ritual of polished boots and pressed uniforms. But for Specialist Emma Carter, these mornings had become a special kind of torture, a gauntlet of whispers and sneers she had to endure with her head held high. Emma stood at rigid attention in Barracks B, her slender frame nearly lost among the rows of muscular soldiers. At 28, she was neither the youngest nor the oldest in the 117th Infantry Division, but somehow she had become the outsider, the one who didn't belong. Her uniform was clean but worn at the edges, her boots polished but scuffed beyond repair, her hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow never looked quite right. "Carter, step forward," barked Sergeant Mills, a stocky woman with cold eyes and a perpetual sneer. "Let's see if you've managed to look like an actual soldier today." Emma stepped forward, her face expressionless, eyes fixed on a point on the wall. She had learned months ago that showing emotion only made things worse. Around her, she could hear the quiet snickers, could feel the eyes boring into her back. "Your boots are still a disgrace, Carter," Mills said, circling her like a shark. "And is that a thread loose on your sleeve? Did you even try today?" "No excuses, Sergeant," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. From the corner of her eye, she could see Travis Cooper trying not to laugh. Cooper was tall, handsome, and cruel, a staff sergeant who had made it his mission to break Emma since her transfer 6 months ago. Beside him stood Melissa Rodriguez, a corporal with perfect makeup beneath her perfect uniform, who documented every misstep Emma made with gleeful precision. And then there was Brian Fletcher, Cooper's shadow, a private first class who had risen quickly through connections rather than merit. They were the golden trio of Barracks B, untouchable and unopposed. Everyone wanted to be them or be liked by them. No one wanted to be their target. "The 117th has standards, Carter," Cooper called out, his voice carrying across the barracks. "Some of us actually earned our place here. Some of us didn't get in through some diversity quota." Emma's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She hadn't gotten in through any quota. She had worked twice as hard as anyone to earn her position. But they would never believe that. To them, she was just the quiet girl from nowhere who didn't fit the mold. "Inspection isn't over, Carter," Mills said, her lips curling into a smile that sent ice down Emma's spine. "Complete uniform inspection today. Strip down to your PT gear." Emma's heart stuttered. "Here, Sergeant?" "Did I stutter, Specialist?" Mills snapped. "Full inspection, now." This wasn't standard procedure. Everyone knew it. Uniform inspections were conducted with dignity, with privacy afforded for anything beyond the outer uniform. But no one spoke up as Emma slowly removed her jacket, her hands steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "Hurry up, Carter," Rodriguez called out, pulling out her phone discreetly. "Some of us have actual work to do today." Emma unbuttoned her uniform shirt, revealing the standard issue tan t-shirt beneath. She folded each item with precision, a small act of control in a situation where she had none. "Shirt too," Mills ordered, her voice laced with malice. "PT gear means PT gear." A murmur ran through the barracks. This was crossing a line, and everyone knew it. But the atmosphere had been poisoned against Emma for so long that no one dared speak up. "She probably has something to hide," Fletcher Stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Heard she couldn't even complete basic without special accommodations. Emma stood in her sports bra and uniform pants, her skin prickling in the cool air of the barracks. Her body was fit, toned from years of service and training, but she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way no soldier should ever feel during a routine inspection. "See? Nothing special," Cooper jeered. "Not worth all the special treatment you seem to think you deserve, Carter." Emma had never asked for special treatment. She had only ever asked to be judged on her merits, on her work. She excelled at communications, could repair equipment that left others scratching their heads, spoke 3 languages fluently. None of that mattered here, in this moment of calculated cruelty. "Pants 2 specialist," Mills said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Complete inspection." Emma's hands moved to her belt, her mind racing. This wasn't just humiliation anymore. This was harassment, clear and reportable. But who would believe her? Who would take her side against Mills, against Cooper and his crowd? She had tried to report smaller incidents before, only to have them dismissed, only to face worse treatment afterward. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Sergeant Mills," a quiet voice broke through the tension. It was Rivera, a quiet specialist who bunked near Emma. "I believe regulation states that." "Did I ask for your input, Specialist Rivera?" Mills snapped, turning her glare on the young soldier. "One more word and you'll be joining Carter in this inspection." Rivera fell silent, his eyes dropping to the floor. Emma didn't blame him. Standing up for her was a quick way to become a target yourself. She unbuckled her belt, her fingers working methodically despite the shame burning in her throat. 6 months ago, she had arrived at Fort Devereux with hope and determination. 6 months of isolation, of accidental shoves in the mess hall, of equipment that mysteriously malfunctioned when she needed it for training, of evaluations that never seemed to reflect her actual performance. "Look at those cheap workout clothes," Rodriguez whispered loudly to Fletcher. "Does she shop at the dollar store?" Emma's PT shorts were standard issue, just like everyone else's. Her sports bra was plain, functional, from a department store. Nothing special, nothing worth commenting on. But that was the point, wasn't it? They would find fault with anything, everything. "Not even fit enough to be here," Cooper added, looking her up and down with exaggerated disappointment. "Standards have really slipped." Emma stood in her PT clothes, her uniform neatly folded beside her, her eyes focused on the middle distance. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She wouldn't cry, wouldn't plead, wouldn't show anger. She was a soldier. She had endured worse than this. But had she? The physical trials of basic training, the grueling exercises, the sleep deprivation, the screaming drill sergeants, none of it had prepared her for this slow, deliberate dismantling of her dignity, her self-worth. "Turn around, Carter," Mills ordered, her voice cutting through Emma's thoughts. Emma turned, presenting her back to the barracks, to the eyes that judged and found her wanting. She heard a small gasp from someone in the ranks, quickly stifled. On her right shoulder blade, partially visible above the line of her sports bra, was a scar, ragged, unmistakable. The kind of scar that told a story no one in this room knew. "What's that, Carter?" Mills asked, her voice suddenly sharp with curiosity rather than cruelty. "That scar, how'd you get it?" Emma's spine stiffened imperceptibly. "Training accident, Sergeant. It wasn't." They both knew it wasn't. Training accidents left clean. Scars documented in medical files. This was jagged, the kind left by shrapnel or a bullet that had grazed rather than penetrated, the kind left by combat. "Bullshit," Cooper said, stepping closer, his curiosity overriding his desire to humiliate her for a moment. "That's not from any training I've ever seen." Emma said nothing, her eyes fixed on the wall ahead, her breathing carefully controlled. This was the secret she had kept, the part of herself she had buried deep when she transferred to Fort Devereux. Not out of shame, but out of a promise made, a promise to stay quiet about operations that never officially happened. Probably fell off her daddy's tractor, Rodriguez suggested, her voice dripping with disdain. Country girl like her probably has all sorts of random scars. Emma wasn't from the country. She had grown up in Pittsburgh, in a small apartment above her father's bookstore. After he died, she had joined the army at 18, looking for structure for purpose. She found both, and more. Much more than anyone in this room knew. "Turn back around," Mills ordered, her voice betraying a flicker of uncertainty now. Emma turned, facing the barracks again, her expression still carefully neutral. She could see curiosity in Mills' eyes now, mingling with the cruelty. Cooper had stepped closer. His eyes narrowed as he studied her with new interest. Rodriguez and Fletcher exchanged glances, sensing a shift they didn't understand. "Where were you stationed before here, Carter?" Mills asked, her tone slightly less harsh. "Fort Benning, Sergeant. Communications Division." Another lie. A necessary one that appeared in her official records. One that hid 3 years spent with the specialized unit that operated in shadows, in countries where American soldiers officially never set foot. "Funny," Cooper said, crossing his arms. "Got a buddy at Benning. Says he never heard of you." Of course he hadn't. Emma's files had been carefully constructed, her history edited to hide the truth. Only those with the highest clearance knew where she had really been, what she had really done. "Big base," Emma replied simply, offering no defense, no explanation. The tension in the room had shifted. The cruel entertainment of watching Emma's humiliation had been replaced by something else. A current of unease, of questions without answers. The barracks door swung open, cutting through the tension like a knife. Everyone snapped to attention, eyes forward, as heavy footsteps entered the room. "General on deck." Someone called out, and the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. General Marcus Westfield was not supposed to be at Fort Devereux. As commander of the Special Operations Division for the Eastern Seaboard, his visits were rare, scheduled months in advance, accompanied by entourages and fanfare. His unexpected appearance in Barracks B, alone and unannounced, was unprecedented. Westfield was tall, imposing despite being in his early 50s, with silver at his temples and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He surveyed the room with a quick, practiced sweep, his gaze settling on Emma, standing at attention in her PT clothes while everyone else remained in full uniform. "What's going on here, Sergeant?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm as he addressed Mills. "Uniform inspection, sir," Mills replied, her voice steady despite the sudden appearance of a 2-star general in her barracks. "Is that so?" Westfield's gaze remained on Emma, something unreadable in his expression. "And why is this soldier in her PT gear while everyone else is in uniform?" Mills hesitated, her confidence faltering under the general's scrutiny. "Complete inspection, sir. Checking for contraband." "Contraband," Westfield repeated, the word flat with disbelief. "And have you found any, Sergeant?" "No, sir." "I see." The general stepped forward, his movements deliberate as he approached. "Emma, name and rank, soldier. Specialist Emma Carter, sir. Communications Division, 117th Infantry." Westfield's eyes narrowed slightly at the name, a flicker of something recognition. Surprise? Crossing his face before his expression returned to professional neutrality. "Turn around, Specialist Carter," he ordered, his voice giving away nothing. Emma turned, presenting her back to the general, knowing exactly what he would. See, the scar on her shoulder, the truth it told to those who knew how to read it. Behind her, she heard the general's sharp intake of breath, felt the sudden stillness of his presence. "Everyone out," Westfield said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Except Specialist Carter and Sergeant Mills." There was a moment of stunned silence. then the shuffle of boots as soldiers hurried to obey. Cooper hesitated, his curiosity warring with his instinct to follow orders. A sharp look from Westfield sent him on his way. Within seconds, the barracks was empty except for the three of them. "Specialist Carter," Westfield said once the door closed behind the last soldier. "You may put your uniform back on." "Yes, sir," Emma replied, reaching for her neatly folded clothes. As she dressed, the general turned to Mills, his expression hardening. "Explain yourself, Sergeant. Why was this soldier being singled out for this type of inspection?" Mills swallowed visibly, her earlier confidence evaporating under the general's steel gaze. "Standard procedure, sir. Random selection. For thorough inspection. Is that so?" Westfield's voice was dangerously soft now. "Because in my 30 years of service, I've never seen a random selection that required a soldier to strip down in front of their entire unit. That sounds more like harassment to me, Sergeant. Targeted harassment." Mills said nothing, her face pale, her eyes fixed on a point just past the general's shoulder. Emma finished buttoning her uniform jacket, standing at attention once more, fully dressed but still feeling exposed. The secret was out now, or at least part of it. The question was, what would the general do with it? "That scar on Specialist Carter's shoulder," Westfield said, turning back to Emma. "How did you get it, Specialist? And this time, I want the truth." Emma hesitated, her eyes flickering to Mills, then back to the general. "Classified operation. Sir, Talil Air Base, Iraq, 2020. The incident is detailed in File Sierra 93. Mills' eyes widened at this, her gaze snapping to Emma with new understanding and shock. Sierra files were the highest level of classification, operations so sensitive they were known only to a handful of people at the Pentagon. Westfield nodded slowly, his suspicions confirmed. "I thought so. I reviewed that file personally." He turned to Mills, his expression cold. "Sergeant Mills, you are dismissed. Report to my office at 1600 hours. Mills saluted stiffly and left, the door closing behind her with a finality that hung in the air between Emma and the general. "You're not just a communications specialist, are you, Carter?" Westfield asked once they were alone. "No, sir. Task Force Omega, 3 years of operations in regions where we officially had no presence. Distinguished service that can never be acknowledged publicly." Westfield's voice was quiet now, respectful. 4 confirmed saves of high-value targets. A silver star that exists only in a classified file. And now you're here, being harassed by soldiers who have no idea who they're dealing with. Emma remained silent, her posture perfect, her expression revealing nothing. Task Force Omega was a ghost unit, its existence denied even to most high-ranking military officials. Its members operated without recognition, their achievements recorded only in files that would remain sealed for 50 years. "Why here, Carter?" Westfield asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "With your record, you could have had any assignment. Special Forces training, officer track, Intelligence Division. Why transfer to a standard infantry unit?" Emma met his gaze directly for the first time. "My choice, sir. After Talil, after what happened to the rest of my team, I wanted something quieter." Westfield nodded, understanding in his eyes. The incident at Talil Air Base had been a success on paper, hostages rescued, targets eliminated. But the cost had been high, too high. "And how's that working out for you, Specialist?" he asked, a touch of wry humor in his voice as he gestured around the now empty barracks where she had just been humiliated. Despite everything, Emma felt her lips twitch in the ghost of a smile. "Not exactly as planned, sir." "I would say not." Westfield studied her for a moment longer, then came to a decision. "Get your things, Carter. You're being reassigned, effective immediately." Emma blinked, the first real surprise she had shown. "Sir, your talents are being wasted here. And clearly, this unit doesn't deserve you." Westfield's tone brooked no argument. Report to my vehicle in 20 minutes. We're heading to Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg, sir? Emma's mind raced. Fort Bragg was the home of Special Operations Command, the nerve center for the Army's most elite units. Problem with that, Specialist? No, sir, it's just, I chose this assignment for a reason. Westfield's expression softened slightly. I know why you chose it, Carter. I read the psych evaluation after Talil. You wanted anonymity. You wanted to disappear into the ranks. But hiding your light isn't helping you heal. And it's certainly not helping the Army utilize one of its most valuable assets. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she wasn't hiding from her past, but from the weight of expectation, from the pressure of being one of the best. But soldiers didn't argue with generals, especially not generals who knew their deepest secrets. 20 minutes, Carter, Westfield said, heading for the door. And pack everything. You won't be coming back. As the door closed behind him, Emma stood alone in the barracks, her world tilting on its axis once again. The humiliation of moments ago seemed distant now, overshadowed by the sudden change in her circumstances. She had come to Fort Devereux, seeking anonymity, a chance to be just another soldier. Instead, her past had found her, as it always did. With methodical precision, she began to pack her few belongings, her mind racing with questions about what would await her at Fort Bragg. New missions? New dangers? Or perhaps, finally, a place where her skills would be respected rather than her differences mocked. Outside the barracks, she could hear the murmur of voices, the rumor mill already churning. A general had appeared out of nowhere, had singled out the barracks outcast, had dismissed everyone else. By evening, the stories would be wild, unrecognizable. Emma found she didn't care. Let them talk, let them wonder. The truth was classified anyway. Outside Barracks B, the sun had climbed higher in the Virginia sky, casting harsh light over Fort Devereux's parade grounds and administrative buildings. Emma moved quickly, her few possessions packed into a standard-issued duffel bag and rucksack. She had never accumulated much during her 6 months at the base. No photos on her wall, no mementos, nothing personal. Some had mocked her Spartanness as further evidence of her oddity. The truth was simpler. She had learned long ago not to get attached to places or things. As she crossed the quad toward the visitor parking area, Emma could feel eyes following her from windows and doorways. News traveled fast on a military base, especially news as unusual as a specialist being personally escorted off base by a 2-star general. She kept her gaze forward, her posture military perfect, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurry or hide. Cooper, Rodriguez, and Fletcher stood near the motor pool, watching her approach with expressions ranging from confusion to resentment. They had clearly expected to witness her disgrace, perhaps even her discharge. Instead, they saw her walking with purpose, her gear packed as if for a new assignment rather than a hasty exit. "Carter!" Cooper called out, stepping into her path with the confidence of someone used to intimidating others. "Running away? What did you say to that general?" Emma stopped, measuring the distance between them, noting Rodriguez filming discreetly with her phone. One last attempt to humiliate her, to control the narrative. 6 months ago, she might have walked around them, avoiding confrontation. But something had shifted when Westfield recognized her scar, when her past came rushing back. "Nothing that concerns you, Staff Sergeant," she replied, her voice calm but carrying enough authority to make Cooper blink in surprise. "Don't get smart with me," Cooper snapped, recovering quickly. "You've been reporting us, haven't you? Playing victim to the brass?" Emma shook her head slightly, almost pitying him. "I never reported anything, never needed to." Fletcher stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Then why is a general here? Why are you packing out? What's going on?" For a moment, Emma considered telling them nothing, walking away and leaving them to their speculation. But some small part of her, the part that had endured months of their petty cruelty, wanted this moment of reckoning. The general recognized. "Me," she said simply. "From before." "Before what?" Rodriguez demanded, her phone still recording. "Before you washed up here?" Emma met her gaze steadily. "Before this assignment. Before my records were redacted. Before I chose to come here." Confusion flickered across their faces, uncertainty replacing the confident cruelty they had worn like armor for months. "You're full of it," Cooper said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're nobody. Just some affirmative action quota fill who couldn't hack it in a real unit." Emma shouldered her rucksack, ready to move past them. "Think what you want, Cooper. You always have. But maybe consider this. There are soldiers whose missions never make the reports, whose medals are kept in classified files, whose names aren't known even to most generals." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And maybe, just maybe some of them look like me." She walked past them then, their stunned silence more satisfying than any comeback could have been. Behind her, she heard Fletcher mutter, "She's lying, has to be." But doubt had been planted, and doubt was sometimes more powerful than truth. General Westfield waited beside a nondescript black SUV, his presence commanding even in this quiet corner of the base. His driver stood at attention nearby, carefully not listening to whatever was about to transpire. "All set, Specialist?" Westfield asked as Emma approached. "Yes, sir," she replied, stowing her gear in the vehicle's trunk. At his gesture, "Good. We have a long drive ahead." He opened the passenger door for her, a courtesy that spoke volumes about her changing status. "And we have a lot to discuss." As the SUV pulled away from Fort Devereux, Emma allowed herself one backward glance. She saw Mills standing outside the administration building, her face pale as she watched the vehicle depart. She saw Cooper and his cronies, still clustered together, their expressions a mix of confusion and dawning realization. She saw Rivera, the quiet specialist who had tried to stand up for her, raising his hand in a small salute of farewell. Then they were past the main gate, accelerating onto the highway, and Fort Devereux was behind her. "You're wondering why?" "I was there today," Westfield said after they had driven in silence for several miles. "Yes, sir," Emma admitted. "I wasn't looking for you, if that's what you're thinking." The general gazed out at the passing landscape, his reflection thoughtful. "In the window glass. I was conducting an unannounced inspection of several bases in the region. Fort Devereux was just next on my list." "Quite a coincidence, sir." Westfield's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Perhaps, or perhaps the universe occasionally has a sense of justice." He turned to look at her directly. "I recognized that scar immediately. Talil, the extraction mission. You took a bullet meant for Ambassador Harrington's daughter." Emma's hand moved unconsciously toward her shoulder, feeling the ridge of scar tissue beneath her uniform. "I was just doing my job, sir." "Your job," Westfield repeated, shaking his head slightly. "Your job was intelligence gathering and communications. Yet when the primary team was compromised, you stepped up, led the hostages through 3 miles of hostile territory, took a bullet, and still completed the mission with 0 civilian casualties." The memories flooded back, unwelcome and vivid. The heat, the dust, the sound of gunfire, the weight of a terrified 12-year-old girl on her back as she ran through darkened streets. The burning pain as the bullet grazed her shoulder, the warmth of blood soaking her shirt. "Captain Reynolds and Sergeant Washington did the heavy lifting on that op, sir," Emma said quietly. "I just filled in when they went down." "Reynolds and Washington were decorated for their sacrifice," Westfield acknowledged, his voice softening. "But you were the one who brought those hostages home. The only member of Task Force Omega to survive that mission. And there it was, the weight. She had been trying to escape. Survivor's guilt, the therapists had called it. The burden of living when others had died. The question that haunted her sleep Why her? Why had she survived when better soldiers, braver soldiers, had fallen? After Talil, you had your choice of assignments, Westfield continued. Delta Force wanted you. Intelligence was practically begging. Instead, you requested a transfer to a standard infantry unit, a fresh start with no mention of your previous service. I needed some space, sir, some perspective. And did you find it at Fort Devereux Specialist? Being harassed by soldiers who couldn't clean your boots in a combat zone. Emma looked out the window, watching the Virginia countryside roll past. Not exactly, sir. I didn't think so. Westfield sighed, a sound weighted with understanding rather than disappointment. The thing about running from your past, Carter, is that you also end up running from your strengths. You tried to disappear into the ranks, to be unremarkable. But soldiers like you can't hide who they are, not really. Excellence has a way of making itself known, even when we try to suppress it. Is that why you're taking me to Fort Bragg, sir? To make sure my excellence is properly utilized. There was a hint of challenge in her voice, a flicker of the fire that had made her one of Task Force Omega's most effective operators despite her youth and relatively junior rank. Westfield didn't take offense. Partly, the Army has invested a lot in your training, and frankly, we need soldiers with your skills. But there's another reason. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I knew Captain Reynolds. He was my protégé, someone I personally selected for Task Force Omega. After Talil, I read his final mission report. Do you know what his last official words were, recorded just before communications went dark? Emma shook her head, her throat suddenly tight. Carter will get them out. If anyone can, she will. Westfield let the words hang in the air between them. He believed in you, Specialist. His final act of leadership was placing his trust in your abilities. Emma turned away, unwilling to let the general see the emotion those words evoked. Reynolds had been more than her commanding officer. He had been a mentor, someone who saw potential in her that she hadn't recognized in herself. I'm not taking you to Bragg to punish you, Carter, Westfield continued after giving her a moment. I'm taking you there because it's where you belong, where your skills can make a difference, where you can honor the faith Reynolds placed in you. The SUV continued north, eating up miles of highway as Emma processed his words. She had spent 6 months trying to be invisible, trying to escape the weight of expectation, the pressure of being Special Forces material. She had endured harassment and isolation rather than stand out, rather than embrace who she truly was as a soldier. For what? To end up stripped down and humiliated in front of her unit anyway? To have her secret exposed by chance? What exactly is waiting for me at Fort Bragg, sir? She finally asked. A new unit. Smaller than Task Force Omega, more specialized. Soldiers with unique skills and backgrounds, brought together for missions that require creative approaches. Another Black Ops team. Not exactly. This unit operates in the open, for the most part. Authorized missions, official deployments. But the personnel are selected for qualities that don't show up on standard evaluations. Resilience, adaptability, the ability to think beyond conventional. Tactics. Emma considered this. And you want me for this unit? I want you to consider it, Westfield corrected. The choice is still yours, Carter. I'm not going to force you back into special operations if you're truly not ready. But I am going to make sure you have better options than being bullied by insecure mediocrity at Fort Devereux. The frankness of his assessment startled a small laugh from her. Is that what you think they were? Mediocre? I've seen their files, Westfield said with a shrug. Cooper was passed over for promotion twice before landing at Devereux. Rodriguez has been cited for unauthorized social media use 3 times. Fletcher failed the Special Forces qualification course so badly. They have a slide about his performance in the What Not to Do presentation. They targeted you because they recognized what they can never be. The revelation should have been satisfying, but Emma felt only a hollow sort of vindication. "They made my life hell for 6 months, sir. And they'll face consequences for that," Westfield assured her. "Mills has already been relieved of duty pending investigation. The others will follow. Harassment has no place in my army, specialist, none." They fell silent as the SUV turned onto a smaller highway, the surroundings becoming more rural. Emma's thoughts drifted to what awaited her at Fort Bragg, to the prospect of returning to the world of special operations, of once again being someone whose actions mattered in the grand scheme of things. "Tell me about this new unit, sir," she said finally. "What makes it different from Task Force Omega?" Westfield seemed pleased by her interest. Task Force Omega was assembled for direct action hostage rescue, high-value target acquisition, the kinds of operations that require absolute precision and overwhelming force. This new group, which we're calling Echo Team, takes a different approach, smaller footprint, longer deployments, more emphasis on relationship building and intelligence gathering before any action is taken. "Sounds more like CIA work than Army," Emma observed. "The lines have blurred in recent years," Westfield acknowledged, "but Echo operates firmly under military command. We've just learned that sometimes the best way to achieve military objectives is through non-traditional means. And you think I'd be a good fit for this? I know you would. Your language skills alone would make you valuable Arabic, Farsi, and Pashto, if I recall correctly. Add your technical expertise and your proven ability to adapt to changing conditions under pressure." He let the sentence hang, the implication clear. Emma mulled this over as they passed through a small town, its main street lined with American flags and storefronts that had seen better days. Her reflection stared back at her from the SUV's window, a young woman in uniform, her expression guarded, her eyes holding more experience than her years suggested. "What happens if I say no?" she asked, turning back to Westfield. "If I'm not ready to rejoin that world?" "Then we find you a different assignment," he replied without hesitation. "Somewhere your skills will be respected, your service honored. You've earned that much, Carter. At minimum." His candor was refreshing after months of navigating the political undercurrents of Fort Devereux, where every interaction seemed laden with hidden agendas and unspoken judgments. "I appreciate that, sir. Don't thank me for basic decency, specialist. It should be the standard, not the exception." Westfield checked his watch. "We'll stop for lunch soon. I imagine you have questions that would be better discussed away from driver's ears, classified as they might be." Emma nodded, grateful for the consideration. She did have questions, dozens of them, about Echo Team, about what had happened to the families of Reynolds and Washington, about whether she was truly ready to step back into the world she had fled after Talil. The SUV pulled into a roadside diner an hour later, the kind of place that catered to truckers and locals rather than passing tourists. The general's driver stayed with the vehicle while Westfield led Emma inside, selecting a booth in the far corner where their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "Order whatever you want," he said as they settled in. "Army's buying." Emma studied the laminated menu, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. The morning's ordeal had left no time for breakfast, and stress had a way of sharpening appetite once it began to fade. After they ordered a cheeseburger for her, meatloaf for him, Westfield leaned back, his posture relaxing slightly. "Now, off the record," he said, his voice dropping. "Tell me what really happened at Fort Devereux. The full story, not the sanitized version." Emma hesitated, years of military discipline making her reluctant to speak ill of fellow soldiers, even those who had treated her poorly. "It's not just idle curiosity, Carter," Westfield added, reading her hesitation. "If there's a systemic problem at that base, I need to know about it. Other soldiers could be experiencing the same treatment." Put that way, she couldn't refuse. Slowly at first, then with increasing detail, Emma recounted her 6 months at Fort Devereux. The initial cold shoulder, the escalating harassment, the deliberate sabotage of her work, the isolation. She told him about equipment that mysteriously malfunctioned when assigned to her, about training exercises where she was deliberately excluded or set up to fail, about evaluations that never reflected her actual performance. Westfield listened, without interruption, his expression darkening as the pattern of harassment became clear. Only when she described that morning's humiliating inspection did he stop her. And no one intervened? No one spoke up? He asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Rivera tried, Emma acknowledged. But Mills shut him down quickly. The others, they were afraid, I think. Afraid of becoming targets themselves. Fear is no excuse for allowing that kind of behavior, Westfield said firmly. Every soldier has a duty to uphold the standards and values of the Army. What happened to you wasn't just unprofessional. It was a complete failure of leadership at multiple levels. Their food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. Emma took a bite of her burger, surprised by how good it tasted after months of bland mess hall meals. There's something I don't understand, Westfield said after they had eaten in silence for a few minutes. With your background, your training, you could have put a stop to this. Cooper and his friends were bullies, not trained combatants. You could have shut them down, made them regret targeting you. It was a fair question, one Emma had asked herself many times during sleepless nights. I considered it, she admitted. Early on, when it was just comments and cold shoulders. But escalating would have meant revealing who I really was, what I was capable of. And that, she paused, searching for the right words. That felt like a betrayal of why I transferred in the first place. I wanted to start fresh, to be judged on my current work, not my past. Even if it meant enduring months of harassment. Even then, Emma met his gaze directly. I made a choice, sir. It may not have been the right one, but it was mine to make. Westfield studied her, reassessing. That kind of restraint takes more discipline than most soldiers possess. More than I might have shown in your position. It wasn't just discipline, Emma said quietly. After Tallil, after losing Reynolds and Washington and the others, I questioned everything. My judgment, my abilities, my right to wear the uniform. Part of me wondered if Cooper and his crowd were right about me, if I was just fooling myself thinking I belonged. Survivor's guilt, Westfield nodded. The psych team warned it might manifest that way. But Carter, you need to understand something. He leaned forward, his voice intense. You survived Tallil because you were good. Because when everything went to hell, you adapted, made the right calls under impossible pressure. That's not luck. That's skill. That's who you are as a soldier, as a person. Emma stared into her coffee, Westfield's words echoing in her mind. Good. Skilled. Who you are. For 6 months, she had buried these truths beneath layers of doubt and guilt, had accepted the harassment as some kind of penance for surviving, when others hadn't. Hearing someone, especially someone like Westfield, who knew the full story, affirm her worth struck something deep within her. Permission to speak freely, sir? She asked, looking up from her mug. Granted, Westfield replied, pushing his empty plate aside. Why me? There must be dozens of operators with more experience, better qualifications for this Echo team. Why track me down, especially when I made it clear I wanted distance from that world? The general considered her question, his weathered face thoughtful. You ever hear of the Japanese art of kintsugi, Carter? Can't say that I have, sir. It's the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the damage, they highlight it, turn it into the most beautiful part of the piece. Westfield traced a line on the table with his finger, as if drawing the gold seam. The philosophy behind it is that something becomes more valuable, more unique, because it has been broken and rebuilt. Emma waited, sensing there was more to his point. Most soldiers who experience what you did at Tallil don't come back the same. They're either broken by it, unable to function effectively afterward, or they become hardened, losing the humanity that makes them good at connecting with civilians in conflict zones. He met her gaze directly. You did neither. You carried your scars, literal and figurative, but you remained whole. That's rare, Carter. Rarer than any tactical skill or language proficiency. With respect, sir, you're making assumptions about my mental state based on a personnel file and a 30-minute conversation. Westfield smiled slightly. Not just that. I've been watching your performance reports from Fort Devereux. Despite everything thrown at you, your work was exemplary. Communication systems running at peak efficiency. Equipment maintenance completed. Ahead of schedule. Training modules developed for new recruits that increased their proficiency scores by 20%. Emma blinked in surprise. Those achievements had been systematically downplayed by her superiors, buried in footnotes of performance reviews dominated by vague criticisms of her attitude and team integration. You did all that while being actively sabotaged, Westfield continued. Imagine what you could accomplish in an environment where your skills are respected, your contributions valued. The waitress approached, offering coffee refills. Both. Accepted. The brief interruption giving Emma time to process his words. Echo Team needs someone like you, Westfield said after the waitress departed. Someone who understands both the technical aspects of modern warfare and the human element. Someone who can make impossible decisions under pressure without losing their moral compass. And if I'm not that person anymore? Emma challenged. If Talil changed me more than you realize? Then you tell me that when we reach Fort Bragg. After you've met the team and heard the full briefing, and I'll arrange a different assignment. Westfield's expression was earnest now, stripped of military formality. I'm not trying to force you back into a role you're not ready for, Carter. I'm offering you a choice, a real one, not the false choice between enduring harassment or leaving the service entirely. Emma nodded slowly, accepting the sincerity of his offer. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've met Major Henderson. She runs Echo Team with an iron fist and a velvet glove, emphasis on the iron. She sounds formidable. That's putting it mildly. Harvard-educated, former Navy intelligence before transferring to Army Special Forces. She speaks 7 languages and can kill a man with a paperclip, though I've never actually seen her do the latter. There was respect in Westfield's voice, maybe even a hint of healthy fear. But she's brilliant, and she built Echo Team from the ground up based on lessons learned from Task Force Omega and similar units. What kind of lessons? Emma asked, her professional curiosity piqued despite her reservations. That brute force has limitations. That understanding cultural contexts is as important as knowing enemy positions. That's sometimes the best way to achieve an objective is to make it unnecessary. Westfield signaled for the check. Echo Team operates on the principle that preventing conflicts saves more lives than winning them. It was a philosophy Emma could respect, aligned with her own experiences in the field. Task Force Omega had been effective, but its approach swift, overwhelming force sometimes created as many problems as it solved. The civilians they rescued often suffered lasting trauma, and the political fallout could destabilize regions. For years afterward, you said the team is small? She asked as they prepared to leave. 12 operators, selected for complementary skills and backgrounds. Each one handpicked, each with a story not unlike yours. Westfield left cash on the table, enough to cover their meal and a generous tip. People who have seen the worst but retained their humanity. People with the rare ability to understand both the big picture and the human details. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Emma breathed deeply, feeling something shift within her. Not a decision, not yet, but an opening, a willingness to consider possibilities she had closed off after Talil. The SUV was waiting, the driver standing at attention beside it. As they approached, Emma noticed a motorcycle parked nearby. a sleek black Kawasaki with government plates. A figure in civilian clothes leaned against it, arms crossed, watching their approach with undisguised interest. "Right on time," Westfield murmured, changing direction slightly to intercept the motorcyclist. The rider straightened as they approached, removing dark sunglasses to reveal piercing green eyes and a face marked by a faint scar running from temple to jaw. Despite the civilian clothes, worn jeans, boots, a leather jacket, everything about his posture screamed military. "General," he greeted Westfield with a respectful nod before his gaze shifted to Emma, assessing her with a quick professional sweep. "This her?" "Specialist Emma Carter, meet Captain Marcus Dunn, Echo Team's second in command," Westfield said, making the introduction with a formality that suggested this meeting was more significant than it appeared. "Sir," Emma acknowledged, noting the way Dunn's eyes lingered on her uniform, likely noting the lack of combat badges or special qualification, tabs that would typically mark a soldier being personally escorted by a two-star general, specialist. Dunn replied, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl. "Heard a lot about you." "Nothing classified, I hope," she said, surprising herself with the ease of the response after months of guarded interactions. A ghost of a smile crossed Dunn's face. "Just the highlights. Talil, the extraction. 4 hostages through 3 miles of hostile territory with a bullet in your shoulder." "Grazing my shoulder," Emma corrected automatically. "And it was closer. To 2 miles. "Still impressive," Dunn said with a shrug. "Most people don't walk away from something like that, let alone complete the mission." There was no judgment in his voice, no trace of the skepticism she had grown accustomed to at Fort Devereux. Just professional respect, soldier to soldier. "Captain Dunn will take point from here," Westfield explained. "I've been called back to Washington for an emergency briefing. Can't wait. He'll escort you the rest of the way to Fort Bragg." Emma glanced at the motorcycle. "On that, sir?" "Not exactly your standard military transport, is it?" Dunn said with the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Don't worry, there's a more conventional vehicle waiting at the next rest stop. The bike's just my personal preference for recon." "Recon?" Emma asked, her interest piqued. "Standard procedure for Echo," Westfield explained. "We screen the route before moving valuable assets. Captain Dunn has been sweeping the road ahead of us since we left Fort Devereux." Emma processed this information, understanding its implications. Echo Team operated with heightened security protocols, even within U.S. borders. Whether this was standard procedure or specific to her transfer, it spoke volumes about the unit's operational mindset. "My gear?" she asked, nodding toward the SUV where her duffel and rucksack were stowed. "Secured in the transport ahead," Dunn assured her. "Already checked and cleared. We're thorough." Westfield extended his hand to Emma, the gesture marking their temporary parting. "Good luck, Specialist Carter. Whatever you decide at Fort Bragg, remember what I said. Your worth isn't diminished by surviving. If anything, it's enhanced." Emma shook his hand, standing a little straighter under his approving gaze. "Thank you, sir. For everything." The general nodded once more to Dunn, then returned to his SUV. As the vehicle pulled away, Emma found herself alone with Captain Dunn, a man who knew her classified history yet remained an unknown quantity himself. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "what's at the next rest stop? Armored personnel carrier? Black helicopter?" Dunn's mouth quirked in amusement. "Nothing so dramatic. Just a regular SUV with better security features than the General's ride. Echo likes to keep a low profile. Hence the civilian clothes and the motorcycle?" "Exactly. We find blending in works better than rolling in with full tactical gear and attracting every eye in a 5-mile radius." He gestured toward the highway. "Ready? It's about 15 minutes to the rendezvous point." Emma nodded, following him to his motorcycle. As they walked, she studied him more carefully. His movements were fluid, economical, marking him as someone comfortable in his own skin and capable in a fight. The scar on his face suggested he'd seen combat up close, yet he carried himself without the aggressive intensity she'd observed in many Special Forces operators. "You have questions," Dunn observed as he handed her a helmet. "Ask them, that's part of making your decision." "How long have you been with Echo Team?" Emma asked, accepting the helmet. "Since the beginning. I helped Major Henderson design the operational framework 3 years ago, after my last deployment with 5th Special Forces Group." He swung onto the motorcycle with practiced ease. "Before that, I was with the agency for a few years. Before that, Delta." An impressive resume, especially for someone who appeared to be in his mid-30s. Emma settled onto the seat behind him, careful to maintain a professional distance. "And Echo Team's primary mission?" she asked as Dunn started the engine. "That's a briefing better delivered securely at Fort Bragg," he replied, his voice carrying over the motorcycle's rumble. "But I can tell you our motto: prevention before intervention. Intervention before escalation." With that cryptic response, he accelerated onto the highway, ending the conversation temporarily as the wind made further discussion impractical. Emma used the ride to organize her thoughts, to process the rapid changes of the past few hours. This morning, she had been preparing for another day of enduring harassment at Fort Devereux. Now she was being escorted to Fort Bragg by a Special Forces captain who spoke of her classified missions with casual familiarity, potentially to join a unit she hadn't known existed. "We're officially designated as a specialized training unit on all public records." They drove past standard military buildings before turning onto a narrow road that led to a cluster of structures set apart from the main base. The buildings were nondescript, indistinguishable from dozens of others scattered across Fort Bragg. Perfect camouflage for a unit that valued discretion. "Home sweet home," Dunn said as they pulled into a small parking area behind the central building. "Not much to look at, but it serves our purposes." Emma stepped out of the SUV, breathing in the familiar pine-scented air of North Carolina. After 6 months at Fort Devereux, surrounded by people who saw her as an outsider, there was something oddly comforting about returning to the world of special operations, where capability mattered more than conformity. "Major Henderson is waiting in the briefing room," Jackson said, checking her phone. "She's eager to meet you." Emma smoothed her uniform, suddenly self-conscious. She had spent the morning being humiliated in front of her unit, had traveled for hours in a vehicle, and was now about to meet the commander of an elite team while looking far from her best. Dunn seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't worry about appearances. Henderson cares about what's up here," he tapped his temple, "not how pressed your uniform is." They led her into the building, past a security checkpoint where Emma surrendered her phone and received a temporary visitor's badge. The interior was utilitarian but modern, with open workspaces rather than traditional offices, and walls covered in maps, data displays, and situation boards. Personnel in both military uniforms and civilian clothes moved purposefully through the space, their conversations muted but intense. "We run flatter than most military units," Jackson explained as they walked. "Less hierarchy, more collaboration. Everyone contributes to mission planning, from the newest intelligence analyst to the most experienced operator." "Sounds unconventional," Emma observed. "Henderson's background is unconventional," Dunn replied with a shrug. "She believes rigid hierarchies limit information flow, and in our line of work, information is everything." They approached a glass-walled conference room where a woman stood with her back to the door, studying a large digital display. Major Lauren Henderson was taller than Emma had expected, with salt and pepper hair cut in a practical bob that framed a face marked by intelligence and determination. Despite being in her mid-40s, she moved with the fluid grace of someone who maintained peak physical condition. As they entered, Henderson turned, fixing Emma with a penetrating gaze that seemed to see past her uniform, past her careful composure, directly to the thoughts and doubts beneath. "Specialist Carter," she said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command without needing to raise her volume. "Welcome to Echo. I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Thank you, ma'am," Emma replied, coming to attention out of habit. Henderson waved away the formality. "We're a bit more relaxed here. Take a seat, all of you. We have a lot to discuss." As they settled around the conference table, Emma noticed that Henderson carried herself differently from most officers she'd encountered. There was confidence without arrogance, authority without intimidation, the demeanor of someone who had earned respect rather than demanded it. "I assume Captain Dunn and Lieutenant Jackson have given you the unofficial introduction to Echo," Henderson began, eyes twinkling with knowing humor. "They tend to recruit before I've had a chance to make the formal offer. They've been informative." "Ma'am," Emma acknowledged, though they've also emphasized that the choice is mine to make. "And it is," Henderson affirmed, her expression growing more serious. "Before we discuss that choice, however, I want to address what happened at Fort Devereux this morning." Emma tensed, bracing herself for questions about the harassment, for having to relive the humiliation all over again. "What you experienced, there was a failure of leadership at every level," Henderson continued, surprising Emma with her directness. "It should never have happened, and I want you to know that. General Westfield has already initiated a full investigation that will result in significant changes at that base." "Thank you, ma'am," Emma said, unsure how else to respond to such a frank acknowledgement. "Don't thank me for basic decency, Specialist. The military has a responsibility to all its members, a responsibility that was severely neglected in your case." Henderson leaned forward, her intensity focused fully on Emma now. "But what interests me most isn't what happened to you at Fort Devereux, it's how you responded to it." "Ma'am, 6 months of targeted harassment, equipment sabotage, career obstruction, yet your performance remained exemplary. You continued to execute your duties with professionalism and skill. You showed restraint when most would have retaliated. You preserved your dignity under circumstances designed to strip it away." Henderson's gaze was unwavering. "Those aren't just admirable qualities, Specialist Carter. They're exactly the qualities Echo looks for in its operatives." Emma shifted in her seat, uncomfortable with the praise after months of criticism. "With respect, ma'am, you're describing basic professionalism. I was just doing my job." "Under extraordinary circumstances," Henderson countered. "And that's what Echo faces every day, extraordinary circumstances that require extraordinary professionalism. We operate in environments where a single misstep, a moment of lost control, can compromise months of work and put lives at risk." She stood, moving to the digital display that dominated one wall of the conference room. With a gesture, she brought up a map of the world with several regions highlighted. Echo currently has operations in 12 countries across 4 continents. Henderson explained. "Some are short-term intelligence gathering. Others are long-term relationship building with local partners. All require operators who can maintain their focus and professionalism under extreme pressure, who can absorb provocation without responding in kind when the mission requires restraint." Emma studied the map, noting that most of the highlighted regions were areas of emerging conflict rather than active war zones, places where prevention might still outweigh intervention. "Before Talil, you were being considered for Task Force Omega's leadership track," Henderson continued, returning to her seat. "Captain Reynolds spoke highly of your potential in his personnel assessments. After Talil, despite the success of the extraction, you requested a transfer to a standard infantry unit. A step back by most measures." "I needed space," Emma said, the words emerging before she could filter them. "After losing the team, after the extraction, I needed to process what happened." Henderson nodded, unsurprised by the admission. "A healthy response. Many operators try to push through trauma without acknowledging it, and they burn out as a result. Your self-awareness is an asset, not a liability." She pulled a tablet from the table, scrolling through what Emma assumed was her personnel file. Your psychological evaluation after Talil noted signs of survivor's guilt but concluded you were processing the experience in a remarkably healthy manner. The recommendation was for continued observation, but no restrictions on duty. Then, why was my transfer to Fort Devereux approved? Emma asked, the question that had nagged at her for months finally finding voice. If I was cleared for duty, why was I removed from special operations? Because you requested it, Henderson replied simply. And because sometimes, the best thing we can do for our best people is give them the space they need to find their way back to their purpose. She set the tablet down, her expression softening slightly. The question now is, have you found your way back, Specialist Carter? Or are you still searching? The directness of the question caught Emma off guard. For months, she had avoided examining her true motivations for transferring to Fort Devereux, had pushed away the nagging sense that she was hiding rather than healing. I thought I needed normal, she admitted after a moment of reflection. After Talil, after the intensity of Task Force Omega, I thought a regular assignment would help me reset, find my bearings again. And did it? Henderson asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. No, Emma said, the truth of it settling in her chest. It didn't. If anything, it made things worse. I didn't fit in because I wasn't meant to fit in there. I was trying to be someone I'm not. Dunn and Jackson exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. They had been through similar journeys. Emma realized had faced their own crossroads and chosen the path that led to Echo. There's a difference between running from trauma and processing it, Henderson said, her voice gentle but firm. One leads to healing, the other only delays it. At Fort Devereux, I was running, Emma acknowledged, the admission both painful and liberating. I told myself I was taking space to heal, but really, I was hiding from who I am, from what I'm capable of. Henderson nodded, satisfaction flickering in her eyes. Self-awareness. The foundation of everything we do at Echo. She gestured to Dunn and Jackson. Every operator here has faced similar moments of truth, has had to reconcile their capabilities with their conscience, their duty with their doubts. It's an ongoing process, Jackson added, breaking her silence. Not something you solve once and for all. But doing meaningful work with people who understand makes all the difference. Which brings us to why you're here, Henderson said. Returning to business. Echo has an opening for a communications and technical specialist with field operations capability. Someone who can bridge the gap between intelligence gathering and direct action when necessary. Someone with your exact skill set, Specialist Carter. Emma glanced at the map again, at the regions where Echo operated. What would the role involve, specifically? You'd be part of a 4-person team, initially focused on operations in North Africa, Henderson explained. We're tracking the emergence of a new non-state actor that's destabilizing several regions, through a combination of cyber operations and targeted violence. Your background in both communications technology and direct action makes you uniquely qualified for this mission. The team needs someone who can intercept and decode their communications while also being capable in the field if things go kinetic, Dunn elaborated. It's a specialized skill set, even by Echo standards. Emma considered this, her mind already analyzing the operational requirements, the potential challenges. It was the kind of complex, multifaceted mission she had excelled at with Task Force Omega, but with Echo's emphasis on prevention rather than reaction. And if I'm not ready? She asked, voicing the doubt that still lingered despite the pull she felt toward this new challenge. Then we find you a different role until you are, Henderson said without hesitation. Echo values its people too highly to put them in positions they're not prepared for, mentally or physically. We can utilize your technical skills here at headquarters, while you continue processing your experiences from Talil. The offer was generous, unexpected, a recognition of her worth beyond her immediate operational value. It stood in stark contrast to Fort Devereux, where her worth had been measured solely by how well she fit a predefined mold. "Take some time to think about it," Henderson suggested, rising from her seat. "Tour our facilities, meet the team you'd be joining, get a feel for how we operate. Make an informed decision, not an emotional one." Emma stood as well, military courtesy ingrained despite Echo's more relaxed atmosphere. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate the consideration." "One more thing, Carter," Henderson said as they prepared to leave the conference room. "Whatever you decide, you should know that what happened at Fort Devereux wasn't about you. It was about them, their insecurities, their limitations, their fear of anyone who challenged their narrow definition of what a soldier should be." The words struck a chord deep within Emma, addressing doubts she hadn't fully articulated even to herself. "How did you know I was questioning that, ma'am?" Henderson's smile held both warmth and understanding. "Because every exceptional soldier I've ever met has faced similar doubts when confronted with mediocrity masquerading as standards. It's the curse of excellence. You begin to question yourself when others can't rise to your level." With that profound observation hanging in the air, Henderson left them, disappearing into the operational hub of Echo's headquarters with purposeful strides. "She has that effect on everyone," Jackson said with a small smile, noting Emma's expression. "Reads you like an open book, then says exactly what you need to hear." "It's uncanny," Emma agreed, still processing Henderson's insights. "Come on," Dunn said, gesturing toward the door. "Let's introduce you to the rest of the team. They've been curious ever since they heard the hero of Talil might be joining us." Emma winced at the nickname. "Please tell me that's not what they call me." "Only behind your back," Jackson teased, leading them from the conference room. "To your face, they'll be all professional respect and military courtesy. At least for the first day." As they moved through Echo's headquarters, Emma found herself studying the operations with professional interest. Unlike the rigid, compartmentalized structure of Task Force Omega, Echo seemed to function as an integrated whole, with intelligence analysts working directly alongside field operators, technical specialists collaborating with cultural experts. They entered a large room that combined elements of a tactical operations center with a collaborative workspace. Maps and data displays covered the walls, workstations were arranged in clusters rather than rows, and a group of soldiers and civilians were engaged in what appeared to be a mission planning session around a central table. "Echo Team, attention," Dunn called, his voice carrying authority despite the lack of formal announcement. The activity in the room paused as all eyes turned toward them. Emma felt a moment of self-consciousness, aware of her travel-worn uniform, and the lingering emotional exhaustion of the day's events. "This is Specialist Emma Carter," Dunn continued, gesturing to her. "She's considering joining ECO as our new Comtech specialist for Sahel operations. Carter, meet the team." One by one, they approached, introducing themselves with the casual confidence of elite operators secure in their capabilities. Staff Sergeant Miguel Ortiz, demolitions and heavy weapons. Captain Sarah Chun, cultural specialist and linguist. Lieutenant James Wilson, medical officer with combat experience. Each greeted her with respect, with curiosity, with none of the skepticism or hostility she had grown accustomed to at Fort Devereux. Last to approach was a tall, lean soldier with the weathered features of someone who had spent significant time in harsh conditions. "Master Sergeant Thomas Reed," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Team lead for Sahel operations. Heard a lot about you, Carter." Emma shook his hand, recognizing the calluses of a career soldier. "Hopefully, not everything." "You heard as classified, Sergeant." Reed's serious expression cracked into a genuine smile. "The best parts are the extraction at Talil. Legendary among those of us with the clearance to know about it." "I was just doing my job," Emma said, the response automatic after months. of downplaying her capabilities. Saving 4 hostages with a bullet wound and no backup isn't just doing your job, Reed countered. It's exceptional, and we could use exceptional on this team. He gestured to a workstation where satellite imagery and communication intercepts were displayed. We're tracking a group that's destabilizing governments across North Africa through a combination of cyber attacks and targeted violence. They're sophisticated, they're disciplined, and they're growing. Emma studied the displays, her analytical mind already engaging with the problem. Their communications are encrypted? Advanced algorithms we haven't been able to crack, Chun confirmed, joining them at the workstation. We believe they're using a modified version of a protocol developed by former intelligence operatives, but adapted with unique elements that have stymied our best analysts. That's where you'd come in, Reed explained. Your background in signals intelligence combined with your field experience makes you uniquely qualified to help us identify and potentially infiltrate their communication network. The challenge was intriguing, exactly the kind of complex problem that had drawn Emma to special operations in the first place. Technical complexity combined with real-world stakes, where success meant preventing violence rather than just responding to it. It would be primarily intelligence work at first, Reed continued, seeming to sense her interest. But with the potential for direct action if we identify high-value targets or imminent threats. Balanced, Emma observed. Technical and tactical. That's Echo's approach, Reed nodded. We use every tool available, technical, cultural, diplomatic, and yes, sometimes kinetic, but always with precision, always with purpose. As they discussed the operation further, Emma felt something awakening within her, the sense of purpose that had been missing at Fort Devereux, the feeling of applying her skills to problems that mattered. The team engaged with her ideas, built on her observations, treated her as a valuable contributor rather than an outsider to be tolerated. Hours passed as Emma toured Echo's facilities, met its personnel, and gained a deeper understanding of its mission and methods. What had begun as an escape from Fort Devereux was evolving into something more significant, a potential new beginning, a chance to reclaim the parts of herself she had tried to leave behind after Talil. As evening approached, Jackson found her in Echo's small but well-equipped gym, where Emma had retreated to process her thoughts through physical exertion. "Penny for your thoughts, Carter," Jackson said, leaning against the doorframe. Emma paused her workout, wiping sweat from her brow. "Just trying to clear my head. It's been a long day. From being humiliated at Fort Devereux to being recruited by Echo, I'd say that qualifies as a significant life pivot." Jackson crossed the room, sitting on a nearby bench. "Having second thoughts?" "Not exactly," Emma admitted, joining her. "More like trying to reconcile where I've been with where I might be going." Jackson nodded, understanding. "After Kandahar, I spent months questioning every aspect of my career, my choices, my capabilities. I wondered if I belonged in this line of work at all. What changed?" "I realized I was asking the wrong question," Jackson said, her expression thoughtful. "It wasn't about whether I belonged in intelligence work. It was about what kind of intelligence work I wanted to do, and with whom." She gestured around them, at Echo's facility. "This is what changed. Finding a place where my values aligned with the mission, where prevention mattered more than blame, where I could use what I'd learned from failure to create something better." Emma considered this perspective, recognizing its wisdom. "At Fort Devereux, I was trying to be someone else, just another soldier, nothing special, nothing that stood out." "And how did that work out?" Jackson asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Terribly," Emma admitted with a rueful smile. "I stood out anyway, just for all the wrong reasons. I became a target precisely because I was trying not to be who I am. There's a lesson in that," Jackson observed. "We can't run from our true nature. We can only choose how to direct it." The simplicity and truth of the statement resonated deeply with Emma. For 6 months, She had been trying to escape the person she had become through years of training and experience. The specialist, the operator, the soldier who excelled under pressure. She had tried to disappear into the ranks, to be unremarkable, and had found only isolation and harassment for her efforts. Echo isn't Task Force Omega, Jackson continued after a moment. We're not here to be the hammer that sees every problem as a nail. We're here to understand problems before they become crises, to apply the right tool at the right time, to prevent what can be prevented and mitigate what can't. Prevention before intervention, Emma quoted Dunn's earlier words. Exactly. But to do that effectively, we need people who understand both ends of the spectrum, the intelligence gathering and the direct action, the cultural context and the operational requirements. Jackson fixed Emma with a direct gaze. People like you, Carter. People who have seen both the successes and the failures of how we've done things in the past. The invitation was clear, the door open. All that remained was for Emma to decide whether to walk through it, to embrace this new path, or continue searching for another. You don't have to decide tonight, Jackson said, rising from the bench. Henderson has arranged quarters for you on base. Take the time you need. As Jackson left, Emma remained in the quiet gym, the day's events replaying in her mind. The humiliation at Fort Devereux seemed distant now, overshadowed by what had followed Westfield's recognition. The revelation of Echo, the potential for a fresh start that honored rather than denied her capabilities. Her phone vibrated with an incoming message, her first since having it returned after the security check. It was from Westfield, brief and to the point. Whatever you decide, remember, scars mark where you've been, not where you're limited to going. Emma's hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder, to the scar that had changed everything this morning. The mark that had once represented only pain and loss now felt like something else, a connection to her true identity, a reminder of what she was capable of when it mattered most. Outside, the sun had set over Fort Bragg, stars emerging in the clear North Carolina sky. Tomorrow would bring decisions, new beginnings, or continued searching. But tonight, for the first time in months, Emma felt something like peace, the quiet certainty of someone who had glimpsed their path forward, even if they hadn't yet committed to taking it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.